So much of what you are hearing, so much of what you are seeing, so much of what you are getting fed in your social media feeds is being overblown. When it comes to Big 12 expansion, I'm Pete Mundo. We are Heartland College Sports. We cover the Big 12, and it is great to have you here joining us for another show. So we're going to take you through what exactly has gone on, how this has all gone down. But just know we are here to give it to you straight. We are here to cut out the BS. We are not here farming for attention on this. We built this brand over 10 years. I am not in any way incentivized to sell you on things that don't have a realistic opportunity of happening. So let's take a step back over the last week and talk about how we got here when it comes to the conversation around the Big 12 and Florida State and Clemson. So this all began in a conversation with another Big 12 podcaster, K-State Big 12 guy, John Kurtz. He's done some very good work. I don't know John personally. I believe he's also based in the Kansas City area, as am I, but we are not familiar with each other. Just to be fully transparent, I like to always tell you guys where I'm coming from, if there are personal relationships involved and everything else. And in this case, they're not. John Kurtz is at Big 12 Media Days, and he talks with Ross Dellinger, and Ross Dellinger says that he thinks there have been some conversations between Brett Yormark and the two universities out of the ACC, the two prizes out of the ACC, Florida State and Clemson. But the key words there that were left out of the initial tweet that John Kurtz put up and then deleted was I think. I think. That's key in early conversations between Florida State, Clemson, and the Big 12. So there is a very important distinction there if you're having an honest conversation about what's going on. I think means I think something is happening, but I haven't confirmed it. Now, logically, many of us would agree with Dellinger that the Big 12, Clemson, Florida State have probably had a conversation, likely through third parties, considering the two universities are dealing with, massive legal issues right now. But he wasn't reporting that. We're not reporting that. If Dellinger had the sources, he'd say, I'm reporting, or sources tell me, something like that, some kind of indication that he has the information on good authority. He did not do that. So I am in no way giving Ross Dellinger a hard time here. But his comments that got misconstrued by a tweet that then got deleted caused this chaos over the last week. Dellinger then goes on to clarify his comments on X, and he posts, my comments from a radio interview should be taken as speculation about possible realignment options and nothing more. So it's okay for Ross Dellinger to go on a show and say what he thinks because it's clearly an opinion. But he had to clarify that because people are so desperate for something on conference realignment, they were grasping for straws. So to be very clear, also, I will say this. Kurtz's headline, which says Ross Dellinger thinks the Big 12 and Florida State Clemson have talked. Nothing wrong with the headline, by the way. That says exactly what Dellinger said. But the two words left off of one tweet is what caused all the chaos to break out. And we've all missed words on tweets. We've all, put out an X, I guess, an X post, and maybe it wasn't worded the right way. So I'm not really even knocking either guy here. Certainly not Dellinger. He was very clear in what he said and what he thinks. And not even Kurtz, who I really don't know. It's just the way this thing, people are just dying for something on this stuff. It's July. It's not quite full-blown preseason conversation. So, man, you see this from Dellinger, and you are just jumping at this thing a million miles an hour. But there's not a lot there at this point in time. Then, what also happens here in the last week? What also happens over the last few days or so is a report from Jason Scheer. Now, Jason Scheer, very good reporter with Wildcat Authority. He's done an outstanding job And he was a guy who was ahead of the curve on Arizona, Colorado, conference realignment, all those different things. So he is someone who I have complete respect for as a reporter. He's not someone who's just doing stuff for attention or clicks. That's not who he is. He's very good at what he does. He puts out a tweet on Sunday that reads, according to sources, there is an internal belief in the Big 12 that Florida State and Clemson are likely to join the conference within the next year or so. Now, there's no doubt that is much more of, a report, certainly, than Dellinger saying, I think something is happening, or I think something may have taken place. This is an actual report from a credible reporter. But let's take a step back here and just analyze that report for a second before we just get all excited by what we see in a post. Like, we see the words we want to see, and then we react based off of what the words are, and we interpret based on the words that we want to see. We see Big 12, Florida State, Clemson, join the conference. And I'll say, whoa, this is amazing. Oh, my goodness, Florida State and Clemson are coming to the Big 12. It's like, calm down, take a breath, and let's actually look at what the report says. The report from Jason Scheer says there's an internal belief in the Big 12. The two schools are likely to join the conference in the next year. How do we read that? Well, why would there not be an internal belief based on the fact that the Big 12 has just added 8 teams the last 2 years? If you are in the Big 12, now we don't know if that source is in the Big 12 headquarters, if that source is somebody through Scheer's connections at Arizona, which of course is the university he covers, however you want to frame it. What does that really mean? That basically Big 12 presidents, ADs, whoever it might be, are optimistic about these two schools possibly being a part of the Big 12 conference. They should be. They should feel great about their leadership right now in the Big 12 with Brett Yormark. Who knows what they're hearing on the back end from conference leadership, what they might be telling them. And then there's this age-old trick. What if whoever this source is or these sources are might be using, and I don't mean in a bad way, but using the media at large to further this speculation, to fan this flame a little bit, to, get it out there, start pumping some pressure as the ACC deals with these lawsuits. Pump some pressure on ESPN, who, of course, is in business with the ACC, but also with the Big 12. That is a part of the conversation that cannot get overlooked. And that idea, that speculation, is very much speculation that needs to be had. So I am not going to jump on this stuff and say, oh, my goodness, you seeing this? They're going to be here any day now. They're not. They have half a dozen cases they've got to take care of, legally speaking. That's all got to get figured out. And then you also have to look at the fact that the Big Ten and the SEC are not looking to create a Power 3 with the Big 12. That does not incentivize them. That does not behoove them to have a Power 3 versus the Power 2 that they're starting to create right now. So why would the Big Ten not jump at an opportunity to lock up Florida State and Clemson, get into SEC territory, add those two schools who provide a lot of value, and further their footprint into SEC country? You really think they would just let the Big 12 waltz in? I'd love to sit here as a Big 12 guy and say, oh, yeah, rah, Big 12. Big 12's in the driver's seat. Everybody wants to be here. I mean, certainly I do. I'm a Big 12 guy. I mean, geez, this is what I do. But I'm not going to BS you about it. I need to see more, way more, before I start buying any of this stuff. If the SEC wants to pass because they're like, hey, we've got enough teams in that part of the country, fine. Although I think the SEC would add those schools and be playing defense by doing it, basically preventing them to go to the Big 10 or the Big 12. And in a zero-sum game that is college athletics, that's the move you got to make sometimes. Then you got the Big Ten saying we'd love to get into SEC country. And the Big 12 is looking at it saying, okay, it'd be nice for us, but what really are the advantages for those two universities? Well, the advantages could be based around the idea of private equity. Let's get into this for a second here. I'm Pete Mundo. We're HeartlandCollegeSports.com. Thanks for joining us. I think I was so fired up when I kicked off this show, I forgot to introduce myself. I mean, that's how fired up I am right now. I'm just ready for the season to be here. But many of you have sent emails. It's been a big topic on our forums. So I said, let me just do a video and a podcast on this, and we'll address it right here, right now. So hit that like button, hit the thumbs up right below the video if you're on YouTube. Subscribe to the channel. That way you don't miss anything as we get closer to the start of the college football season, the Big 12 football season, where, of course, we're going to be focused. And listen, if you're not on the message boards, the forums, we'd love to invite you on there and be a part of that conversation. So equity, private equity. How could that play a role in these two teams, Florida State and Clemson, or anybody for that matter, being more interested in the Big 12? Well, here's how this would work. This is really the play here. If the Big 12 got a private equity firm, and the firm that's being talked about is CVC Capital, to invest up to $1 billion for basically an investment, a stake in the league. A portion of that money would go to the 16 conference members, and that would give them a revenue boost. The Big 12 is going to make about $32 million a school in the new TV deal. The Big 10 is set to make about $75 million per school in their new TV deal. So the Big 12 has a pretty big gap. Now, they're still in a good spot when you compare them to everybody else, but obviously that's a substantial gap they're trying to make up. This CVC company, by the way, is a massive global brand. They've got over $200 billion in investments worldwide. They have investments with other sports leagues, so they know this landscape. Brett Yormark, according to reports, has relationships with them. So that's why this company is the one who's getting some attention here. And good for Brett Yormark thinking outside the box. I think there's still a lot of challenges and hoops to jump through in terms of how this works out, but Yormark talked about it at Big 12 Media Days. And he stated the obvious. He said, given where we are as an industry, having a capital resource as a partner makes a ton of sense. As some of you may know, private equity is already involved in the NBA and some NBA ownership. They're probably coming to the NFL at some point. So college sports is an obvious place for private equity to start looking as well. And given the fact that college sports is in a weird place, revenue sharing is probably coming with the players. A lot of this stuff is going to have to get cleaned up in the years to come. We can't continue with this chaotic, ridiculous NIL, which is nothing more than, pay for play above board. There's got to be some structure here. So with more money flowing into the sport and then players also being a part of that revenue, you've got to get more revenue sources. So the private equity money makes sense. But it's not simply writing a check and moving on. Basically, if you're CVC Capital and you're going to invest $1 billion in the Big 12, you're doing that because you see long-term value. You see long-term investment possibilities in this conference. You think the Big 12 is going to be worth billions of dollars more in 5, 10, 15 years than it is right now. That's why you would invest as a private equity firm in the Big 12. But here's the thing, and to tie this to Florida State and Clemson, the thought is more cash infusion, more money for these schools. They're enticed and intrigued by the Big 12 and what Brett Yormark is building. However, before we get to that point in time, it is very risky for private equity firms to get involved with a conference when a conference can blow up and change in a minute. We're not talking about investing in the NFL. We're not talking about investing in an NBA franchise. That's not how it works. I mean, if you're going to invest $1 billion in the Big 12, and let's be honest, no one really knows what these conferences are going to look like in 5 years or if they're even going to exist. What if you get Pac-12'd? Like, I'm not predicting that for the Big 12. I'm a Big 12 guy through and through. at Heartland College Sports. But like, it's not impossible. It's not inconceivable because of how insane the college sports landscape is. These private equity guys are not idiots. Now, maybe they don't know Big 12 football like you and I do. They probably can't name the backup linebacker for Iowa State. They're probably not naming the backup D tackle for Texas Tech. But they're not idiots when it comes to business. So I am skeptical, generally, until I see it, of private equity playing a big role in the Big 12 conference or any conference because they're not stable. They're not stable entities, even if the Big 12 is undervalued. And there's some belief that, the Big 12 could double its media rights deal by 2031 when the deal comes up. And you go from about $2.5 billion, you become a $5 billion entity. The private equity firm is looking at this and saying, gosh, we're investing in something that's grown theoretically 100% over the last half a decade. That's a pretty good return on our investment. But who could possibly guarantee it? Heck, how do we know Brett Yormark's here in 2031? I mean, I hope he is. I love what he's done for the conference. It's been tremendous. How do we know he's not the next NBA commissioner? Which, if you were to ask me what Brett Yormark's dream job is, I guarantee you it would be being the NBA commissioner. I'm not saying Adam Silver's going anywhere, but my point is this stuff moves so fast. So fast. We don't know who's here one day, who's gone the next. So all of a sudden, people are piecing all this stuff together. They're saying, well, Florida State and Clemson won out. Well, maybe the Big 12's in the mix because the Big 12 thinks it's in the mix. And then, well, with the private equity cash infusion, that could possibly entice Florida State and Clemson to come to the Big 12. Well, they could maybe flex their muscles a little bit more than if they were in the SEC of the Big 10. And I don't know how you feel, but we just got rid of Texas. I'm not really interested in inviting somebody in who wants to be Texas 2.0. Who wants to feel like they run the show. Now, that may be short-sighted of me. You may be sitting there and saying, Pete, you're an idiot. If Florida State and Clemson want to come here, you take them. You don't ask any questions. You do whatever you need to do to get them here. Do you really, though? I mean, if Florida State or Clemson go to the SEC of the Big 10, nothing really changes for the Big 12. They're still where they were. They're still third of the Power 3 conferences. And if they leave, by the way, the Big 12 is potentially opening itself up to some pretty interesting schools, whether it's UNC, maybe a Duke. If you want to build that basketball brand, Big 12 is the best basketball in America. Maybe that's the route you want to take. And by the way, not awful football if you look at their track record the last bunch of years. Do you look at a Virginia Tech, maybe one of the most underrated environments in all of college football? Do you look at a Pittsburgh to pair with West Virginia, a Louisville, an NC State? I mean, some will say it's picking up the scraps, but I'm not convinced it is. The Big 12's stature in the college sports landscape does not change. They don't lose anything by not getting Florida State and Clemson. You don't want to be the desperate one in a relationship. We've all been on one end or the other, where either you're the one dating somebody and you're desperate to stay with them. It's so unattractive. And then when you've been on the other side, someone's desperate to stay with you. I know some of you have been in that situation. I know it's okay to admit. Either way, it doesn't look good. It's a massive turnoff. And that's where the Big 12's got to be careful for the newcomers in this league. Be careful. Those of us who are old school Big 12, we've seen this story play out before, where a program thinks it's bigger than the conference. That's what Texas thought for nearly 30 years in this league, and now they're the SEC's problem. So good riddance. I'm Pete Mundo on Heartland College Sports. Could you hit that thumbs up below the video if you are joining us on YouTube? Thank you for being here. Always appreciate you guys being a part of the show. J-Rod puts on YouTube Live. It'll take private equity and uneven revenue distributions to lure a Florida State and Clemson to the Big 12. Not sure the other members would be on board for that. It's exactly what I'm saying, man. Be careful the deals you make. And as someone who's seen this go on for the Big 12 for the last 15 years, the deals that were made, whether it was handshake deals or actual deals with schools like Texas, be careful what you wish for because it pisses a lot of people off. And that would be my warning sign to the Big 12, to your Mark, to anybody else involved here in these conversations. Pump the brakes here for a second because I'm not convinced we're anywhere close to this happening. The Ross Dellinger comments got blown out of proportion. The Jason Scheer report, he's awesome at what he does, but it's not shocking to me that sources in the Big 12 feel good about Florida State and Clemson. That's their job, to be optimistic, to feel good about their future, and to float these things out there to the media to potentially see what the response is going to be. So what the Big 12 needs to do right now is focus on winning non-conference games and prove their worth on the field this season. That's what the Big 12 needs to do. West Virginia needs to pull off an upset against Pitt in week 1. Oklahoma State needs to make sure it beats Arkansas in week 2. Iowa State needs to get a win over Iowa in week 2. Those are the things that need to happen for this conference as we move forward. That's where the conversation needs to go for the Big 12. And then win a game or maybe 2 in the college football playoff. And the Big 12 is going to be just fine. The rest will take care of itself. It will. All right? Don't you worry about that part. The rest will take care of itself. Let's focus on that. And that's where we're going to be transitioning in the weeks ahead as we get closer to the college football season kicking off. I'm Pete Mundo. We are Heartland College Sports. Hit that thumbs up. We appreciate you being here. Check out our forums if you're not on them. We've got a growing community of Big 12 fans. We're going to be doing some stuff with EA Sports on there. For those of you who are EA Sports College Football 25 nerds, congrats. I know this is a big week for you. I've got a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 4-month-old. If I start playing video games, I am a dead man. You understand that, right? So I'm not going to tempt myself with the game. I will let you guys enjoy it, have a blast. Let me know how it's going. We have a ton of the EA Sports nerds on our forums. They're building up like Dynasty mode and all these things I don't know anything about. But I'm not going to tempt myself because I won't make it out alive right now. So have fun, though, if that's your thing. Thank you, guys. Have a great rest of your day. Subscribe to the channel if you have not on YouTube and on the podcast. Drop that 5-star rating and review. We so appreciate you being here and being a part of the show. Have a great night. Go Big 12 and check us out at heartlandcollegesports.com covering the Big 12 Conference. See you later.